Up until now, we focused on this list over here that shows an overview of blog posts. Now we want to move our attention away from reading data and take a look at the suggestions block over here. As you can see, we have a form here where people can leave suggestions that might end up being featured in this externals list. So let's quickly give an example. Let's copy over one of my own blog posts. What about config builders? It's called. And suggest, then we can see thanks for suggestion over here. And if we go to the admin section and quickly log in, we can go to the externals tab here. We can see there are a few blog posts waiting here. I can delete a few, but I can also approve, for example, the latest one over here. Let's move back to our front page and we can see it's added over here. And in this video, I want to focus on the first step of this flow, and that's filling in the form and actually submitting it. So let's return to our tests. I'm going to create a new test class and call it external post suggestions test. Remember, we extend from our base test case. Let's create a test function. Let's call it external post can be submitted. And just as a little bit of background information, there's this controller, the external post suggestion controller, that will take the request data. It will create an external post. It will send a mail to the blog's admin to let them know there's a post waiting for review. Next, it will show a flash message to let the user know the submission was successful, and finally redirect to our index controller. So I think a good first test here is to verify whether our external post is actually created in the database. So instead of using the get method, we're going to use post. We're going to actually submit a form. And for the URL, let's just use Laravel's action helper, external post suggestion controller, like so, and we'll provide it some data. Right now, I don't remember what kind of data that is. So running this test says it did not perform any assertions. That's a warning, but of course, very important. Let's make an assertion, assert successful, and of course, it will fail right now. Response code 500 is not a successful status code. Let's just add without exception handling here to see what's going on. We can see that we actually forgot to use our refresh database trait here, and I'm actually going to add it in our base test case for now, so that we don't have to reuse it in every test over and over again. Let's rerun our test, and okay, we get a validation exception. The given data was invalid. And so to figure out what we actually need to send, let's take a look at our request over here. We need a title, which is required, and a URL, which is also required. So let's copy over those two, like so. And as a title, I can just use test, of course, and as the URL, like so. Let's rerun this test. And here's another error. Attempt to read property email on null. And if we go back to our external post suggestion controller, that's because we're trying to send a mail to the first user. And since we're starting from a clean database, there aren't any users present. So for now, we're going to do user factory create. Simple as that. We can see that the status code returned here is 302, which is a redirect, and it actually doesn't register as successful. What we can do is assert status and expect it to be a 302. But what we can also do is actually assert that we're redirecting to a specific URI. So that would be the blog post controller and the index method, if I'm not mistaken. Let's rerun this test, and now it actually works. I can remove this assert status call because it's implied by the redirect over here. And if we look at this implementation, we can see that it's actually asserting that we're dealing with a redirect response, which requires one of these status codes. So that's all fine. We've got our test working. At least we've asserted that we redirect to the right page, but now we still want to make sure there's actually something saved in the database, right? And so Laravel has another helper method, assert database has. We can pass in a table name, and actually we can pass in a model class, and the table name will be determined behind the scenes. So external post is the class we're dealing with, and we need to pass in some data as the second argument, and these are actually the row values that should be present in this table. So let's copy this and let's rerun our test, and it's all green. Great. And now moving on to the last assertion, that's actually the message up top. And as you can see, this flash message is only shown once after we've submitted the form. And we're using a spaCy package to do that. And that's the, let me take a look, the Laravel flash package. And this one will actually set a session variable whenever we flash a message, and it's called Laravel flash message. So let's copy this over, because what we can do in our test now, since this is a redirect response, we can't assert that the page we're redirecting to actually has the data, because that isn't in this response. But we can assert that we have a session variable set. Session has, and let's give it the Laravel flash message key. Let's rerun our test. And it's still fine. And just to make sure that this works, let me remove this flash message, and you can see the test fails now. So that's all great. So again, we have a very high level feature test that touches lots of code, but also tests lots of functionality with just a few lines of code.